children.
Yes, Master.
What is it about, sir?
Oh, it's a wonderful story. Anna's family moves to a new home, but it turns out the neighborhood's not so great. However, odd things occur, and it's a mystery what's happening.
Who wrote it, sir?
Have you been living in a sidereal subdimension? Ramsey Campbell, of course. Go look at the video vault to see The Three Stooges Meet Your Golden Egg for more information. All is prepared for the master. I am off. Now, my underling, go organize the conspiracy theory books.
Where are they, sir?
Right behind you.
One of these days. One of these days.
Here is your book, master.
Greetings all. I am very, very excited and happy to have Ramsey Campbell back with us for our premiere book episodes, where we actually are going to go into actual works of art, especially wonderful books such as this wonderful book, An Echo of Children, which Ramsey sent. Oops, let me make sure that it sent me a wonderful copy to read. It came out in September, and it's amazing. I think it's one of your most unique books compared to things like the H.P. Lovecraft and more the mythos type of things and other types of horrors. This to me is one of those subtle, creeping, get under your skin horrors, which I really love. And so one thing for all you watching, there might be spoilers. We'll try not to put too many spoilers in here. Or if there's more spoilers as we go along, it'll be near the end of the episode. You can hop around. But we want to really focus on, again, the craft and the meanings and why an author such as the amazing Ramsey Campbell chose to tell this story in the way he did, as well as why you chose what themes you did, which I think are really neat. And so with that, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me back. Yeah. And do you realize that some spectral thing happened to the book as you held it up? It began to disappear from
There
my
you
vision.
go. Was it technology or was it supernatural? Was it
Who
science or was it magic? And again, that's part of what I think is kind of interesting about the book we'll be talking about. And let me ask you, if you had to explain what this was book about to like someone saying, what is this book that you wrote, without giving away too much, what would you tell people?
It's the anti-exorcist, I would say. I mean, I like the movie. I mean, I read the book at the time, but I've seen the Friedkin film a couple of times. I mean, it's an extremely well-made film, and very carefully constructed. I mean, we saw it again quite recently, Jenny and I was very struck by how classical the structure is. And it actually takes really about an hour before we get to anything overtly supernatural. It takes a long time to build up just, hints of unease and so forth. But having said all that, I like it a good deal, as a supernatural fiction. But I think it's based on medieval claptrap, basically. I've got no time at all for the notion of possession and exorcism. And more specifically, I think that attempts to exorcise children are a form of child abuse. I mean, frequently lethal and far too often fatal, and which I find very disturbing. And so that is at the core of this book. This is what I specifically wanted to talk about, and it surfaces gradually in the course of the novel. Where did it come from? Now, this is one of these, I know you did ask me that question, but I've just asked it to myself. Basically, I often find it difficult, because we're talking now about, at least a couple of years back when I, conceived the book and began to develop it. Well, probably more than that when you think about it, because by the time it reaches print, I'm already, well onto something else. So, I never end. Well, I suppose I will eventually, but I'm not working on that anytime soon. And so as far as I can take myself back, and I've had to look at the notes, but they're only of limited explanation, because things were going on in my head that I didn't necessarily note down specifically. I think at the very outset, maybe this is where the book came from, is this strange business that when some sort of atrocity, some sort of very horrid crime has been perpetrated in a house, and the perpetrators have been tried and jailed, presumably, that sometimes the local authority, the council in Britain, will buy up the property and demolish it. As if it's some sort of, well, Steve King's phrase, the bad place. But in this case, presumably, usually something it's bad because of a specific act that's been committed therein. But I found something weirdly medieval about the fact that a modern council would take what is in essence just an ordinary building and say, by implication, this is evil and we must raze it to the ground. Of course, there's this additional thing very often that souvenir hunters will come along and try and take away bits of it for purposes that we probably don't even want to imagine, which again is highly medieval. I think from that came the book's preoccupation with this other medieval notion of exorcism. And I thought, conflating the two, here comes that book, and that's really, I think, the dual source of the story.
It's interesting too. Again, I have my own points of view because again, it is the artist puts forward what they have and go, oh yeah, as you were mentioning that, because again, I like reading lots of horror things. I'm thinking about the end of The Haunting of Hill House, the original, where they go, I want to burn this house down and salt the earth.
Yes.
Right. It's kind of like that concept, as you're saying, is you exercise a location.
Sure.
And everything you're saying, again, I think you're mining from something classic, as you said, that classical things going back to medieval times. I don't know, it's popping into my head, Nigel Neal and the Stone Tapes. You ever see that?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Where it goes back in time, like everything's layered and layered as well.
Yes.
And
I mean, nobody did it better than Neil at his best. And I mean, it's a bit like Lovecraft, isn't it? The conflation of the supernatural and the scientific, and effectively using one not to explain away the other. In a sense, again, as with Lovecraft, the explanation only brings on worse things, So far from doing away with or solving the issue, it simply conjures up more and worse.
Well, exactly. And some of those things, it's like the science and the magic are the same. It's just different people's points of view looking at it, but they're not wrong, but they think they're at odds, which is also something interesting about your book, which I really like. And it reminded me too about, and probably totally off of, like Hell House from Richard Matheson, where everyone goes in and thinks they know the answer to the explanation of what's happening.
Yeah.
And they're all sort of right, but they're all sort of wrong. And in your book, as I said, like you could read it one way, but you could also see other ways. And again, we haven't even really talked about what the book's about yet. We talked about its theme, but again, it's what I also liked is it's not like ancient eldritch horrors necessarily, and there's no like rip roaring like gore or anything. This is like, again, more, I think, highly psychological, creeping horror. Which is interesting because you mentioned The Exorcist. It's the anti-exorcist, but in The Exorcist, as you said, spoilers, not really, but you see it's supernatural by the end. There is no other explanation. In yours, I think it's left a little bit.
I beg your pardon. I was going to say, one thing that kind of bothers me about The Exorcist is it's fundamentally, isn't it, a sort of caricature of adolescent rebellion. She discovers her own body, her own sexuality. She starts swearing. She starts disrespecting authority and religion in particular. All of which is your average teenager, really. I mean, the idea is don't bring a priest to tie her down to the bed or whatever. I think most of us develop out of that adolescent phrase, and it's disquieting to me that there are lots of people, it seems, who say no, it must be demonic. This is what's happening. We must somehow do away with this what is only really a stage of development. Admittedly, of course, as I say, caricatured in the film, but nevertheless, I do think that's that's what it is an image of, if you like.
Well, it's interesting then too, because your book has, I guess, a major focus on the boy Dean, who's
Mm,
younger than Regan from The Exorcist, who's in a
yeah,
different developmental stage, one with a
sure.
lot of imagination and
Yeah,
play and so on.
yeah.
So now they bring it. And I guess we should actually say, what is this like on the surface about? Uh, which is
Well,
about, I guess, a
very
family with their
straightforward,
kid moving into a house, which we find is in not the greatest neighborhood.
yeah. Hmm.
And the grandparents of the father's side get a little bit concerned about what they feel is odd. But there's another set of grandparents that come in who might think it's odd, but not so odd. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just me putting there because I don't want to say anything else. But I guess how would you actually kind of say about, on the surface, this is the story about?
Well, I think we have
Yeah.
to say it is about
Mhm.
a young couple, parents who become obsessed with the notion that something is affecting their young son, that they have to intervene somehow. And we're actually seeing it from the viewpoint of one of the grandparents, although really we're basically getting that couple, Thom and his wife Jude, um, who have different views of what is going on in this family, of which they are the parents and grandparents. But fundamentally, it's about, well, it's about two sorts of obsession in a way, isn't it? It's the parents' obsession with their young son, and it's the grandparents' obsession with what's going on in the house and what is going on and how much should they intervene. All of which is, is a sort of classic dysfunctional family of the kind that I seem to get drawn back to as a writer, particularly as a novelist.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think it resonates so well. It's like this is not like so far off that people can't resonate with it, even if there was nothing supernatural in it.
Oh
You can just
gosh.
go, "Whoa, I see this all the time."
Well, you see, this is it. I'm not going to name them. I really mustn't because it would be wrong. But I mean, years ago, I was visiting some friends of mine who were in America. But that's by the way. But a writer and his wife and their young son, and I had dinner at their house, and the entire time we're talking about 3, 4, 5 hours. Everything they said to this poor kid was a criticism. Why are you doing that? Don't do that. Stop that. Don't say that. What are you talking about? And this went on for hours. It was utterly painful. And I discovered later on that their the friends that we had in common, they lived there. They saw all this constantly, and they were very troubled by it. But I suppose what I'm really saying is, to people who read my novel, just in case you think, well, this is exaggerated, no, it's toned down. Believe me.
Right. And well, I'm a psychiatrist and I actually see this quite a lot. And it's
Mm.
often where families, again, sometimes a child has a lot of imagination or they have, like, let's say, attention deficit disorder or a little bit of
Mhm.
Asperger's, and they're a little bit different. So they
Yeah,
have different types of behaviors. And if you knew what it was, you could adapt and make them flourish. But a
yeah,
lot of people who don't understand that think, oh, this is just a misbehaving child. And they get angry and angry and they try to do
yeah,
things that don't work. And it gets more and more intensified and
sure.
polarized to where they're
Yeah.
just ugly. And
But,
again, yeah, yeah.
but I mean, in the case I'm talking about, as I say, I'm not going to identify anybody, but it wasn't that they were behaving badly. On the contrary, they were just behaving very normally. Good God, there was nothing there. As I think is with with Dean in the novel. If anything, he's kind of painfully polite, isn't he? Which I think
Well, exactly.
becomes one of the issues.
Right. And it gets back to saying, like, because again, in the story, before the family moves in there, it seems like they don't, at least from what I was reading,
Mhm.
the grandparents never saw their children misbehave, like treating their grandchild differently until then.
No,
And then
that's
something
right.
changes, which is part of
No.
maybe a supernatural explanation or something else. But
Mhm.
it gets back to sometimes wondering, because there's one thing which I like, you never actually really give any point of view or get into the heads of Allan and Coral, who are the parents. We get to
No.
hear way more of the perspective of everyone outside. So we don't know
Mm.
why they're doing what they're doing and why they're thinking why they're thinking. Not that it
Mhm.
justifies it. But it would
Yeah.
have been, that's the interesting thing is, why are they treating Dean this way? Which we don't really know,
No, that's right.
which is a fascinating thing. I mean, it sounds like, again, what's interesting is they become more and more religious or
Yeah.
whatever that is, being in
Mhm.
that neighborhood, which is fascinating as well. Um, and yet, I guess, well, I'll ask you this. Was that your intent too, is to kind of keep the parents' points of view completely opaque?
Well, not so much opaque as open to interpretation, I think, the kind
Right, but
of
we'll never know. I mean, that's what I
no.
mean is we never get Alan thinking, my mom's got dementia and I got to keep
Yeah,
her away because she's a danger. And
yeah.
they don't realize that our boy, even though he's polite, he's actually a psychopath and he's done all these different things. Not that I
Yes,
think that's the case, but I mean, it's always fascinating. It's like Rashomon or what, it's like until you get
yes,
all the different explanations, you don't really get a real feel about what's truly going on if we could ever get that far. We get mostly the
sure.
grandparents seeing this reaction. And at the end, yeah, spoilers, hop over this at the end. I guess the grandmother is in a home at the end with
Mhm.
some what seems to be some mental health stuff
Yeah, that's
going
right.
on.
That's
So it
right.
also raises the thing about reliable narration or reliable
Mhm.
narrator. I got
Mhm.
that right too. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I like to believe she was totally reliable, but
yeah,
I like to also say, well, maybe, or like Thom, her husband's always going, hmm.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. You see, well, what do I know? I only wrote it.
Well, that's the cool thing about writing what you intend and then what others might see in it too. But I do think there's tons of issues about trauma, as you pointed out, and the whole, well, again, I guess as they find out, I mean, the whole area they're in has a whole traumatic history. But I think
Yeah,
also, you mentioned how the house, you can break a house down to get rid of all of its history.
yeah,
But I guess again, this is why I thought the Nigel Neal Stone tapes, like, yeah, that feel about, it's not just the house, it's the whole
no,
area is like renamed. It's like the whole thing is being covered over. Like, let's
yeah,
not talk about the trauma. Let's not acknowledge it ever happened. Let's pretend none of it happened so that it can happen again, sort of thing.
that's
You
right.
know?
Absolutely. I was fascinated to learn while I was researching the novel that the famous Rillington Place, as in 10 Rillington Place, in the movie, maybe you know that story. There was a film with Richard Attenborough who's very good in it.
Oh yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, and John Hurt, who was equally excellent. But there were murders committed in London in this suburban house, and they've now renamed the road. That was something else that I incorporated in the book, which I found very suggestive. And one wonders how often that happens. What
Mm-hmm.
what don't we know is just around the corner.
Right. And again, it does get back to this whole concept too about, should one hide history and pretend it never happened, or actually acknowledge it so it is known so people can understand it, to
Mm,
not let it happen again? Because I always wonder, again, it's like, whether it's Holocaust or other sorts of things where they always say, well, let's just remember what's happened so
yeah,
we
yeah.
try not to let it ever happen again. And this
Well, that's
story's kind of like, let's keep cloaking it over. Or also,
yeah,
again, it's like, or even I guess now that I think about it, it's like the other grandparents who were trying to cloak over things too. Like, let's not look at that.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
always find another explanation versus, wait, maybe this
yeah,
is right in our face, but we just
yeah.
don't. Yeah.
That was one of the things that I found in writing the book, and this is something I often find. I work it out one way in my notes, which I don't plot. I think we may have said this before last time, but anyway, I don't plot in advance anymore, and I gather a lot of material, but far rather the whole thing developed organically, and I found it has a much stronger structure that way and much greater narrative logic than if I try and work out the all the events in advance. And one thing I often find is that, by the same token, that the act of writing means that I discover stuff about the characters, and they surprise me by not being what I thought they were going to be. And the other sort of grandparents originally were going to be far more antagonistic and, hostile to everything that our couple say or think. That was the way I was going to play it. But when I started writing them, I found they were a lot more sympathetic. I mean, maybe they're wrong, but that's not quite the same thing. Until very late in the book, they don't really turn in any way hostile. They may, they may feel, well, this is more a matter of, age creeping up than actual truth of perception. But nonetheless, they're sympathetic in their thinking, and that kind of took me aback in a good way. I think that's part of the I like to. Anyway, I think writing, particularly writing a novel, is a process of discovery for me, and to surprise myself with what I do, and that's part of the pleasure of doing it.
Well, I think also when you mentioned, and maybe this did come into the story too, about the friends you had a long time ago and you witnessing what they were talking to their son. It's like real life experience getting in there. They're not caricatures. It's actually real people. I think also, again, the fact that you made that not so polarized. It's like, okay, the parents are not monsters necessarily, like characters out of a black and I mean, it's like you can feel, oh, there's a dimension to them more. It's like, so that makes it worse in some ways for the horror, in the sense like, oh, I can just go. I like to have certainty. They're bad. Well, maybe they're bad-ish.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole concept too, is who's really possessed. If we go to the supernatural thing, which I really like, spoilers, but again, like the whole concept, whether Jude is like, again, whether it's a paranoia or her fitting things, crystallizing a paranoid delusion, but the concept that where they live and why they live there and so on is somehow possessed the parents. The kid's not possessed. It's the parents who are possessed. Even though the parents even get an exorcist as in the book to kind of do some rituals for their son, focused on them, don't realize maybe they're the ones who have been taken over by something.
Well, indeed, and the policeman says about the previous case, if anyone was possessed, it was the parents, or words to that effect.
Exactly, and therefore, you can have more sympathy for them again. It's like, can you save the parents, not just save the kid? Everyone's, and this is the whole thing about cycles, I guess, of trauma too. Everyone can have a bit of sympathy because everyone's kind of like stuck in this thing. It's how to get everybody out. And I guess, well, I won't say the solution seems pretty radical at the end.
Well, yes. But it's the only one I could think of, basically.
But it makes total sense too. And it kind of speaks too, again, about some, so I'm not going to say what it is, but again, something we were saying about with some of the other things we're saying about the solutions that people have tried to do in similar situations. So your ending ties into what other people have tried to do in real life.
Yes, oh yeah. Yeah.
Which is really cool. And I like some of the revelations you build too. This again made me feel M.R. Jamesian. You ever read Our Lady of Darkness by Fritz Lieber?
Oh, very much so, yes.
Yeah. No, I like, there's a revelation, which I won't say too. It just kind of like, again, we kind of alluded to it. It's just like, da da da. It's like, where are we living?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, these are all like really good, like layers and layers. So when you're writing this too, then I guess I had a question. It's a weird kind of question I'm going to ask. Do you have fun writing it? Like, is it like, I don't know, like reading it, it's like, oh, this is so cool. Like you must be like, oh yeah, I'm going to put this in, like.
Well, essentially, yes. I mean, I think, there's huge pleasure in creating, even if it's dark, there is still the pleasure in, getting the language right if you can, the structure. I mean, I always try and construct not just the scene chapter, let's say, but, the paragraph and the sentences even, and the dialogue. I mean, there's a great deal of dialogue in this novel, probably as much as in any novel of mine, actually. And I think it's very important to me, as far as possible, to think, yeah, that is how somebody would speak, in real life. I really don't like dialogue that doesn't ring true to my ear. So, I try and hear it in my head, occasionally even, speak it out loud. And that's one thing that occurred to me. It wasn't that I was trying to emulate it, but when I'd finished the novel, one thing that it did put me in mind of was Rosemary's Baby. That is the R11 novel, which is told, at the time impressed me hugely as being the first horror novel I could think of that's told very largely through dialogue. And, the narrative in between is very sparsely conveyed. He doesn't waste any detail at all. And there's no real attempt at atmosphere, because you don't need it, because it's all in the action and in particularly the dialogue and what lurks behind the dialogue. I suppose I always like that, and the Polanski film as well, because certainly I, become paranoid on behalf of Rosemary before she sees what's going on. You think, oh, you begin to see things, the possibility of why that such and such a thing is happening and what's really going on there. And you've sort of put it together before she does, although you probably haven't quite put together what's really going on. But you've certainly got this, distinct feeling of paranoia. And again, something else this reminds me of, I'm now spinning off at many a tangent, but I've always liked Agatha Christie. And I mean, I read her when I was a kid, basically when my mother was a great fan. So when I was about 10, 11 years old, I read all the Christie novels up to that point. Then I kind of lost touch with reading her. And then quite recently found a very, very, very attractive facsimile edition of the original novels, the original publications, going in a local second-hand shop for a very good price. I bought them all up and started reading them again. And I mean, you don't look to her for great prose, but you do find real linguistic dexterity, the way she uses language, and specifically, making you think you saw something you didn't, or making you think she said something that she didn't. Nobody was better at that than Christie. But the thing is this, her work is often described as cozy crime. I'm inclined to think of it as cozy paranoia, because in a sense, once we get to know what she's up to, how she does it, I think, if you continue reading her work, you're looking at everything with a sort of suspicious eye. And, looking at all the pros, thinking, does that mean something else? Is there something lurking behind that? And all the characters, are they really innocent, or are they up to something? Which is really how a paranoic experiences life, it seems to me. So in a way, in a sort of safe way, contained way, those books are putting you through that, I think. Now, I've gone completely off the point, haven't I?
Oh, no, I don't. No, I think it's extremely ties into this, because as you're saying, yours is mostly, it's like dialogue and discussions, because you're talking about people's points of view, their theories, and their perceptions of reality. And that's what this is, and around how it can cause people to hurt other people without even intending it, even though they might think they're doing the best for this person, but in fact, they're harming them. But it can be not just with Dean. It's like everybody's like, oh, because again, good old grandmother does some really intense things near the end. And so does grandfather. And again, that might be considered kind of harmful in what they do. But because as you said, like, it's that this is not a story about like a monster's going to pop up and go, it's more like, is this right? Is it like, again, there's a scenes too where it's not even in the neighborhood of the house, which I found interesting. I can ask you about that and what you were trying to get at. It's when they go to a carnival. They go to a carnival, and the grandfather starts seeing stuff around the boy, which makes it almost seems like, is there something attached to him, something supernatural, or is it just because they've been talking about stuff before that this has affected his mind and the shadows are playing tricks on him, that it might have nothing to do with the boy, it's all in his head? But it gets back to that, like, again, the Agatha Christie things, like, okay, I'm just throwing some stuff in. like I was just wondering what you were intending because it is now outside of the whole area where all the
Oh,
horrors
I
were
think
supposed to.
my idea really was, one that the town quite possibly is, in a way, the territory of the supernatural, even in quite an understated sense. But also, if indeed this spectre has been expunged from the house, doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't mean it ceased to exist. It just means it's around somewhere, and presumably, if it's not an area that's been whatever you want to call it, exorcised, then it can still be active. And obviously, it is. That's one of the things. It's not harmful to the boy if it exists. Quite the contrary. Which was perhaps not saying too much for people who have not yet read the book, but there we are.
Right. But again, we'll just say like he has an imaginary friend at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like on The Exorcist, was it Captain Howdy? Okay, thank
That's
you. Okay, yeah. So I mean, like,
right.
but again, lots of children have imaginary friends. This again back to it's not like outrageous. It's just lots of kids have imaginary friends, and it helps them in lots of ways, and that's good. So but and again, how he says certain things makes other people think different things based on what they believe. Well, I
Yeah.
just again like because the grandmother is starting to read up on the neighborhood, she assumes that because sometimes I guess the it's not good because this is at the very beginning. The imaginary friend could just be a head.
Yeah.
That means it was something horrifically bad happened to him.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. People have all sorts of interesting imaginary friends,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So it was I found that fascinating. Uh and again, like it's happening outside where they think it's all supposed to be focused because it's not
Yeah.
just that house necessarily, it's the whole now neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But then
right.
it gets back to you said the paranoia. It's like I think at some point they're breathing in the dust. They're breathing in the dust of the former stuff, and it's affecting their minds.
Yeah.
And being a psychiatrist, sometimes that again is not what you intended, I think, or maybe you did. But some people, who start getting delusional
Mm.
disorders and start thinking that sounds like stuff people would start thinking everyone's in on it.
Oh,
Everyone's
yeah.
in on it. Everyone's breathing in this stuff and they're all in on it. It's a
Yeah.
conspiracy. Rosemary's
Yeah.
Baby and all the rest. So now they raise
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So I thought this. Do you find this book then kind of different from? Well, I think it is like from the rest of the kind of things you have
It's
written.
kind of
This
a
seems very
development.
different than a lot.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it feels like a logical development, if you like, another stage in a way, because I, do my best not to repeat myself. Well, you can't actually, you will inevitably, but, maybe you do it a different way, even if you're doing, you're still returning to your chosen themes or the themes that have chosen you, depending on how you want to look at it. And one thing I have tried to do over good heavens, 60 years or more now, isn't it? Is kind of refine the style, refine the approach. Because I'm a great admirer. One of my favorite writers is Graham Greene,
Mhm.
and it's very much what he does. You read the early novels, it's all there. You still recognize Greene, but as he goes on, he pares more and more of it away, and distills it and refines the style. And it's also got partly to do, I suppose, with the fact that my attitude to rewriting has changed over the decades. I mean, there was a time I can't tell you, I don't because I don't know, where the point of transition was. But there was a time when I came to rewrite a first draft, I try and salvage as much as I could justify to myself. These days, I'll try and get rid of as much as I can possibly justify. And in fact, I'll put it another way, it has to justify itself to me to be kept, and otherwise I'll either, I'll condense it or I'll get rid of it or I'll rework it or I'll restructure it maybe even. But often enough the final draft, well, it still is recognizable, but it's a very thoroughly reworked version of the first drafts that I do. And I think that process is continuing in this novel, really.
And well, I think what you mentioned is something I guess many writers and artists in general, as you said, like it's getting that, I don't know if it's the maturity or the acceptance that you can throw away stuff that doesn't work for it, and it should
Oh
be.
yeah,
It's that editing process where people, it's my baby.
yeah,
Oh wait, what am I trying to do here? Okay, let
yeah,
me just take all this stuff I chopped away. I won't throw it away. I'll put it in
yeah.
a notebook somewhere. Maybe it'll come into another story someday.
Well,
It's
that's a
still
possibility,
gold,
isn't it?
but it's
Yes,
not
yeah.
for
You still,
this.
yeah, yeah. I'm equally a believer in economy, certainly, artistic economy. So yeah, if I might very possibly, salvage what I can for somewhere else, if it might fit somewhere else. Yeah, yeah, it's a good line or something. Probably not the entire scene, because I mean, I'm now. This is what I was saying earlier. I'm now. Gosh, I'm now really 1.5 novels past that one. I mean, I've already delivered next year's novel. I'm well getting towards probably the midpoint of the latest novel in progress. But one of the things about the novel that falls between An Echo of Children and the one I'm writing now, which is to say the one that will come out next year, I remember taking great delight in looking at a chapter and saying, well, no, I don't need this, so that chapter can go. So it did. And so there's a sort of wicked glee in doing that to myself.
I wonder too, again, like, in academia or other artists too, and things where they go, it's like almost imposter syndrome or something, like feeling confident enough that you know what you're doing.
Mm,
It takes
mhm.
time, I guess. Like, yeah, I can chop this out versus, oh
Yeah,
no, I put so much work into it and I don't know, and I don't know. But it
that's
sounds
right.
like, again, it's like you feel confident in your abilities, I guess.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
guess it
yeah,
takes time to build the confidence that this is what it is and I know what I'm doing. So cool, chop, chop.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not
Yeah.
sure I do know what I'm doing, but I just pretend I do.
Well, at least you're fake it till you make it. But you made it. And I remember, again, speaking of like the first part to what it ends up, you still write in actual journals, like
Oh yeah,
handwritten journals, which I think is
absolutely.
kind of a very interesting thing. Is there a reason why you do it handwritten in a journal versus typing? Does it
I
help with the
always
creative
have, but
process?
yeah, it just feels right, basically. Having said that, with almost no exceptions, I write fiction longhand to begin with, but non-fiction, I do that direct onto the computer, simply because it's two different mindsets in some way. Um, or maybe it just keeps those two processes separate, which may be quite important because, if I'm writing a new piece of fiction, that'll be done in the mornings, and in the afternoons I'll tend to do, yeah, if I've got non-fiction to do, I'll do that then.
Is that
So
something you developed over the years too? Like you
yeah,
found out
yeah,
your
yeah,
rhythms and where you have,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. This goes
exactly,
to
yeah.
show you again, it's that experience over time of just understanding
Mm,
who you are to be able to bring this forward.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
are you allowed to actually give any hints or clues about what's coming out over the next year?
Well, I don't see why not. I mean, it's a weird one because it's kind of a companion piece in a way to An Echo of Children.
Hmm.
Next year's book is called Ancestral, and the basic notion is of two families who, way back when, the remote ancestors of the two families were occultists, or, whatever you want to call them, and who were very much at loggerheads, and who actually had a sort of magical duel, which didn't come didn't turn out well for either of them, but it left a kind of antagonism, I beg your pardon, running through the two families, who gradually come together, over the centuries, and now the latest generations, they've married, the young couple have got married, and they have a young son, so it's beginning to look like An Echo of Children all over again. But no, what's happened is that the hereditary memories have now merged in, the latest offspring, and inadvertently he's now resurrecting what the original folks attempted to invoke, and so that's where we start from.
And
But
that's
of course,
just the beginning.
one
Okay,
thing I wanted to avoid, obviously, was any notion that he was possessed. It's not that. it's simply that he's the memories have found a focus in him.
Oh, that sounds excellent. Okay, and then you have another one you're now working on, but
Oh
maybe it
yeah,
has no title yet, or
never ends, never ends. Tell you.
well, but I think that's the thing about a creative person is that's what they do. They create.
And of
Otherwise, what
course,
would they do?
the other thing I'm doing is yet again never ending the Stooges book, because even more stuff has turned up since, so it will never
Right.
end.
So, and again, for those who for those who haven't seen our other episode, I'll put it in the links about us talking at length about the Three Stooges, and that you
Yes,
already have
yeah,
a book out there, and I'll put that in the links too. Are you
that's
making
right.
like a sequel or it's an expanded
No,
version?
no, it's not that. But I mean, there's just we've just brought out a third printing, and I have to
Hmm.
tell. And I hope I don't want to upset or frustrate too many people who already have the wretched book, but this is somewhat expanded because films I thought were lost, which were reputed to be lost, turned up online, pristine copies on YouTube and the like. Somebody had managed to discover and have put up there. So now I had to incorporate that, and also there were insights and references I didn't know existed that I wanted to put in, and so I suspect it will go on to my grave, and I'll be heard in my casket to be putting the last footnote.
And depending on the situation, maybe even beyond.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
yeah, because whenever I come across strange Three Stooges images, I think I fire them to you as well. Whenever you
Oh,
might have
thank
them
you
all,
very
but I
much.
go, hey, look, I just found this. Like somebody posted on Facebook,
Yes,
oddball
yes.
things. But that's the nice thing about the internet too, is there's lots of new materials. Well, I guess old materials being rediscovered.
Oh, gosh, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, the one thing I'd say is the Echo of Children. I'm trying to think if there was any humor in it. Sometimes, but actually, no. That's why I think this is very interesting too. It gets grimmer and grimmer and grimmer. I like it a
Yeah,
lot in the sense
yeah,
that it
yeah.
just builds and builds and builds. And but again, I think a lot of people are surprised that a lot of people who love horror love comedy. Like, how are people reacting to this book? Because it is different from a lot. A lot of them go, "Whoa,
Yeah,
where's Glacky?" No, there's no Glacky. Go, no, there's no Glacky.
well, there's not. I agree. And well, I mean, I don't know if I said this to you last time, but maybe I'll say it again anyway if I did. But whenever I send out a new novel to my agent, I always think either he's going to say, "Well, this is not what we expect of you," and I don't think we can handle it. It's just too unlike what you're supposed to do. Or he'll say, "Well, look, you've done this once too often. Now you're just repeating yourself. We can't do with that either." And it's only when he says, "Well, no, I like it." My editor at the publisher said he likes it. I think, oh well, maybe I did get it right after all to some extent. And this is how I felt about Echo of Children. But no, the responses have been really very positive, and I'm very pleased. But a lot of people have said it was it kind of kept them up at night, or not, or maybe kept them awake, but kept them up to finish reading it. And my lovely lady Imogen Howson, who I work with, she's the copy editor at Flame Tree Press. I mean, it's her favorite of my books that she's done, and she's done a whole bunch. So maybe I haven't altogether lost it if I ever had it in the first place.
Where you just keep improving over time, like fine wine, and it
I
just
do it,
keeps getting
I do
better
it.
and better. And
Well, yes,
again,
except if you lay it down too long, it goes off.
all right. Now I'll ask you now, anything else you wanted to add or comment upon about your book before we kind of
Well,
wrap up?
I don't know, except I mean, you held up that what you've got as an advanced reading copy
Yes, I
there.
have it
Yeah,
doesn't look
yeah,
like this normally, but
that might be. I
I'm
just see
very
the look.
proud that I'm very, very honored that you
Oh,
were able to send me one of these because I
my
don't normally
pleasure,
get
my
like an
pleasure, my
unproofed
pleasure.
copy.
But that little image on the front there, doesn't it kind of gives you some idea of what the book actually looks like, which is sort of golden cover. It's gilded as it were, and they're doing beautiful things for me, Flame Tree. So I couldn't be happier. There
But
it
yeah,
is. There it is indeed. Yeah.
and I'll put a better copy. You know how I like to add things
Oh
that'll
yes.
be seen by everybody here.
Excellent.
It's very nice. Is this like, again, now that you're doing like family stuff? Well, I don't know if it's like ancestral next. Is that also going to like have like gold? Is this like a new kind of like
Yes, I
look?
think so, because the Incubations, which was last year's novel, that was the first one they did it for. And so I think this is now going to be the way the new novels are going to look.
Well, they do look excellent, and they deserve to have a wonderful cover.
Well,
Not
thank
that you
you.
can judge a book by its cover, but at least on this one, I'd say the cover does look excellent, as is the
Yeah.
material inside.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're most welcome. Well, I think that's it for now. Hopefully, I'll talk to you again on another book at some point, because it sounds like they're going to keep on coming.
Oh, they will. They will. You can't stop me yet.
And I guess I have to pick up the new edition of the Three Stooges
Oh,
book.
I think you
Did it
should.
just come out too, or when did that one just come
Yeah,
out?
yeah. Last few weeks.
Oh, the last few weeks. I did not know this.
Yeah,
Okay. You want to tell everyone what it's called?
Oh, it is called Six Stooges and Counting. And if you don't know why, well, you've got to get the book then.
That's true. The expanded version. Okay,
And
I'll put a link in for that too.
ever growing. It's like the blob, basically. It's just get bigger and bigger.
All right. Just like them.
Just like the author.
All right. Well, Ramsey, thank you so much for talking with me, and have a great Halloween season.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me. And yes, indeed, don't lose your head.
I'll try not to. Thank you.